Welcome, everyone. It's really a pleasure to have everyone join us once again for the third session in this series. I'm joined today by my dear friends, Dee Ashby and Sergio Mendoza, both experienced executive leaders. I'll take just a minute. Dee, remind the audience where you're at, a little bit about your background, and then we'll go to Sergio.
Thank you, Pat. I am a retired, repurposed superintendent from Hopkins County in Kentucky and worked as a student partner for 4 years, fell in love with the work, and decided to join the team as a leader coach.
Thanks, Dee. And Sergio, a little bit about you.
Yes, hello everyone. And like Dee, I am also a refurbished retired superintendent. Took a year off and have just joined with the leaders of Studer, as I was a partner also in California for 3 years, and excited and very passionate and bold about continuous improvement.
Thanks, Sergio. And just so that those of you, I'm Pat Greco. I live in the metro Milwaukee area in Wisconsin. I too was a superintendent, served in public education for 38 years, and I was one of the earliest partners in the work as Studer Education was forming from Studer Healthcare, and had the great pleasure of being able to join the team both as a coach and a thought leader in the work that we do together. We've had a couple of opportunities to be together. One of the individuals that also is instrumental in this work is Mandy Gagliardo. She's on screen today because she's going to be helping us navigate some of the questions that you may have, in addition to some of the questions that we formed in advance of this. Just for some housekeeping, when you look at the bar of being able to navigate it, we have the Q&A section open. Mandy, do you want to share any specific directions for them in order to post?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. So we have our Q&A open. We're asking everybody here to please submit your questions for our panel today. We'll have a couple of questions that we've already received that we'll go through, but we want to hear from you. And if you just open that Q&A, you should have the prompt right there to submit your questions. And you can also read other attendees' questions and give it a thumbs up if you want to upvote if you have the same question and you'd like to hear answer from our panel today.
All right, thanks, Mandy. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time doing a recap of some of the information that we shared over the last couple of sessions. When we think about the work together, the reason why leaders choose the work with Studer Education is really threefold. It's to build leader strength, system strength in the work that you're doing with improvement, accelerate the results that are most important to your community, to your children, to your families, and making sure it's a great place to learn for children and a great place to work for your team members. So as we do that work together, we know everyone wants to make a difference. We're really coming in partnership in order to be able to do that work alongside. When we've worked in the last couple of weeks, we've really been targeting the impact. How do you actually build the success for your leaders in the impact that they want to have, as well as the work that you want to have together as a team. And when we grow leadership at every level, it's our greatest capability of being able to help the entire system thrive. When we think about that growing leaders, it's really built on that foundation of the 9 principles. You'll have reference of this in the slides. As we think about the principles themselves, half of them really relate to how do we build great teams? How do we build those routines for great culture? And half of the core principles really relate to how do we align the system to the areas that are most important to improve and making sure that we're executing well on that. And when we think about how do we do the work, it's really centered around that work of people first. How do we actually generate that work with getting close to the voices of the people closest to the work, that commitment to service to one another, as well as the children, families, and communities that we serve, and really that tight view of, are we executing well the right strategies, and how do we know, based on the evidence and the data that we have. When we look at that sense of alignment in communities, we're really trying to figure out what's most important to improve. Your people can't work any harder on a given day. It's really how do we create that aligned impact and really making sure that the work we're doing is the work in alignment with the impact that we're intending to have. And as we think about that execution, how do we actually start with those priority goals, aligning the development? We all do adult learning within our organizations, but is the development aligned to really what we want to get tight on? Are people clear on those always actions? Is our feedback aligned closely to what we're saying we need to be tight on? And are we looking for the bright spots of who is generating the strategies that are producing the evidence of results? And then how do we align our time, our talent, and our purpose to making sure that that through line is clear? So we've covered the foundations, our core principles, we've covered our execution framework, we've talked about how do we build some of those key strategies for early leaders to get started with. Mandy is a plethora of resources because we have case studies, we have resource tools, we have a variety of things that are accessible to you. And we're going to be highlighting a little bit from the experience we have from 3 executive leaders who have done this work in collective for many years and seeing the power and the impact as we were executing it across the teams. So as we think about just a few key questions to start off, we know not only from our own experience, but based on the research that when we get closest to the people closest to the work and use their feedback with that deep listening, we're able to actually leverage the improvement of the teams. How did you prioritize it? You know, often we get asked of how do we fit it in as one more thing within busy weeks? So how did you prioritize that time, and how did you expect your leaders to prioritize that time as you were building that deep listening within your systems? Dee Dee, I'm going to start with you. Sergio, then I'm going to go to you, and then I'll just add anything that may complement the feedback that you're giving.
Well, certainly what you measure, you monitor. And so when you're going to make something a strategic priority, I believe that especially at the beginning of the year, you need to give them time as principals and leaders to develop almost a make and take plan of how they're going to implement rounding 30, 90-day conversations in their building, how they're going to divide that up, how they're going to record those pieces of feedback that they get, and then how they're going to actually take that and lead to action. And so I think that when we do that, again, giving them time to pause and really work on the work, getting ready for the start of school.
Thanks, Judy. Sergio, what would you add?
I would just add that we need to be able to communicate the why, the what, and the how of that is going to be done with each individual leader. Definitely have to create a cadence on your calendar to make sure the individuals that you're meeting with, that they are also in that cadence, right? And they know that you will be coming to either their place or inviting them to your office. So I believe that's a great 2 steps that will help support this leader rounding.
Nice, Sergio. And one of the things that I found helpful is every one of our weeks are full, you know, and Sergio, as you indicated, if you don't calendar it, it's going to slip away. You know, so I would calendar about 90 minutes on Wednesday mornings. That was the quietest morning that I had. And I just blocked 90 minutes and then identified which leaders I would be rounding with. I also used that time when I was rounding with the student groups. And we started that as young as 5th grade on up to senior year, and really used the basic questions of rounding. You know, when school is working for you, what's one thing we're doing well? When school is tricky, what's one barrier that you're facing that we could help with? So we were using some of those same core questions, whether it was with students. And then the other thing that I found helpful is I would round with the board twice a year individually. And with our board committees, we would put those rounding questions at the beginning of the committees, because it also helped the board center on what's working well right now and what's one area, so that you're not surprised, but what's sitting in their head that they want to see us tackle, so that we're keeping that open communication there. When we think about one way to support your newest leaders, and think about regardless of role. And when I say that, I'm thinking about your night supervisors that might be working in facilities, your food service team members, your driving, your supervisors that are working with your drivers. Any role of leadership ends up needing to be part of that development plan over time. So what is one thing when you were thinking about supporting your newest leaders? Sergio, I'm going to start with you and then go back to Dee.
Initiated a mentorship coaching program with new leaders from experienced mentors in the organization. So that really helped not only build relationships between the leaders, but also a safe place for the new leader to have some interactions with them. And then I think the other best practice was about what Dee said earlier in rounding, about the 30, 60, 90-day rounding cycle, that I made sure that I had regular check-ins with these new individuals to just see where are they. I met them in the initiation of the HR paperwork and offered them a pin from our district, and then said, as I come around, I'll be asking you how things are going. So that is that follow through that individuals would like to also see, right? The superintendent is actually going to talk to me, and it's not a joke. It's not a joke, right? And it's not lip service, it's action, an actionable item.
Yeah, nice, Sergio. Thank you. And Dee, how about you? When you think about your newest leaders?
Yes, I love the frequent check-ins, Sergio. I think that's so important. Research shows that new staff members, whether certified, classified, they are more apt to stay with a team if they have somebody to eat lunch with. And I know that seems crazy, but you think about the student eating alone or the staff member eating alone. It's so important to work with our campus leaders to help new staff members really make a connection to somebody, a friend that they have, so they don't feel isolated, so they have somebody that they feel comfortable to talk with and check in again on those frequent check-ins.
Yeah, really important. And one of the things, one of the greatest parts of the work that we do, regardless, when we started teaching, we went into it because we really wanted to grow, the people that we were sitting in front of as students, as leaders. It's really our greatest gift is to being able to grow that deep level of leadership across the team. And I found over the course of the years, teams typically have a tendency of thinking most about their certified staff and then forgetting about, the development and growth of their classified leaders. And they're hungry, both to feel part of something bigger than just their job role, but they're hungry also to support their team members. So one of the things that when we were working together as a leadership team, it was really building that capability of those next level leaders, regardless of job title, so that they could see, their voice mattered through rounding. They had the opportunity to lead team problem solving projects. They had the opportunity to lean into learning with our Studer coaches, because we included both sides of the house in those executive leader opportunities to grow. So having that ongoing ability to grow, learn, lead, and contribute really made a big difference for our team members. As we think about, regardless of where you would lead, and think of one or two of the always actions that you would carry with you, regardless of what your job title is. Dee, I'm going to go back to you first.
Well, we've talked a little about relationship building. You can't say enough about that. But I think my other big one is service excellence. service excellence to those we serve in the classroom, in the building, but also to one another. Just always putting that service excellence on the forefront of who we are and how we treat one another.
Sergio, what would you add? One or two of the always actions that you would take regardless of where you lead?
I think the cascading of communication from the boardroom to the classroom is very effective and can also seem kind of simple in what I just said, but at the same time complex, because you're communicating to a community of learners where you're providing that information, but if you do it in a cascading manner, you don't miss a group, you don't miss the information, and it becomes definitely clear to all of us what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it every single day. So it really did matter, that communication that I love to keep doing as much as I can.
Yeah, really. And both of those points, you know, when you think about Dee Dee, the service excellence with the core values of how do we live, you know, how do we actually bring to work our best selves every day, and Sergio, that importance of making sure everybody feels part of, you know, that in the know, you know, so they really have that ability to feel that touch level of the system. One of the things that I would add, you know, because both of those are critically important, one of the things that when we think about feedback, both in receiving it, but then also giving it, you know, often leaders think of feedback as the performance conversations once a year. You know, but one of the things when we think about that daily, weekly feedback of managing up the people who are demonstrating the core values that you want to see scaled across the system, or the literacy strategies that are really creating that bright spot, or, you know, the cleaning protocols that are really making a difference, you know, both for the teachers and the students, but really that line of sight to that great service is how do we actually keep that feedback high for the people who are the contributors, really specific, not saying you're awesome, but really saying, you know, Dee Dee, when when you're really doing that mentoring alongside Sergio, it really helps us accomplish both the support to him, but making sure that the entire team can keep that leverage, making sure that our feedback is really tight in the moment, in order to be able to create those nudges of really that alignment of the arrows. You know, the clearer we are with our language, the clearer people understand that you know, what is recognized will get repeated, and how we actually provide that recognition isn't a platitude. It's really that line of sight to really those key priorities that we're trying to accomplish. I'm going to pause here for a minute because we did just that starter and had the ability to do that. We have a few more questions, but Mandy, I'm going to pop it to you if there's anything else that you want us to pause on and think about right now.
Well, we do actually have one question that I think ties really well into the conversation about feedback, which I think you provided some really good examples, but we have a question about clear communication and feedback, and how those are two areas where people seem to struggle often and the most. And I'm curious if you have any advice or experience you could share in how you've coached leaders who struggle in these areas, not necessarily because they don't communicate or provide feedback, but maybe they're bought in and they're practicing communication and feedback, but not necessarily in ways that are helpful or effective. Maybe some like practices or strategies that have helped you to bring them along and improve those practices.
Yeah, and Mandy, it's a really important point, because part of the challenge that we have is, and it goes back to, the adage of clear is kind, unclear is unkind. So, and how do we actually get really supportive of leaders to get really comfortable it as a habit, as that always action, and that isn't the feedback tool. It's really that ongoing conversation, often And in our state, we have a mandated teacher evaluation process. We have a mandated leader evaluation process. And too often the training is targeted at how do you fill out the tool? You really have to actually focus on how do you build that confidence level to manage up your people who are your strong performers and do it in a way that continues to help them grow. And how do you actually build the confidence level to have those crucial conversations in the moment and not putting that off because it hurts the team, hurts the individuals that they're serving in the role that they have. So it's really that ongoing support for leaders to build that deep level of confidence to have the hardest conversations well in order to support the individuals and support the team members that they're intending to serve. Dee, Sergio, what would you add?
I would just, anytime we're talking about feedback, remind everybody to follow up and follow through. Because it's so important as we receive feedback, and feedback doesn't always feel great, and sometimes it feels wonderful, but regardless, we have to let people who give us that feedback, that take the time to share that information with us, to know that their voice is valuable to us and that we want their input. And so following up and following through on whatever that feedback is to take action to impact.
Yeah, nice. Sergio, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just add the importance of kind of working with leaders in your district to really learn those communication techniques, is like I statements or open-ended questions to help with some of that feedback. Also, the great skills that you will learn in leader rounding about active listening, empathy, clarity, and making some of those rounds that are not significant, but you do them on a daily basis, that you get some clarity of what is truly happening within the classroom or in the area of that person's job. Because making yourself visible and approachable is also that relationship that it helps build that follow-up and follow through.
And Sergio, you're raising an important point. Dee, you did as well, of the more we're rounding, the more we're understanding from that individual's perspective, what's working and where they're getting stuck. It allows for us to solve it on the front end, so that we aren't putting that off. So when we received the employee experience survey or the student experience survey or the parent experience survey as a leadership team, there was very little in there that was shocking, because with the rounds, you actually know where the pain points are, and we can already respond to, here are some of the things that we're trying to do in order to tackle that. So that, and the other piece is helping every leader understand feedback is a gift, because we can solve for anything if we know it. So that feedback, that direct line, even from a parent who is angry or a student who is struggling or a teacher, that isn't necessarily feeling supported, we can solve for anything if we know it, and we can work on that together as a team. Mandy, where would you go next with the next question?
I would tag a little bit more into rounding. We have a kind of specific question about leader rounding, which we know it's an opportunity for us to understand barriers that individuals are facing that we can help remove. And this question's about how have you helped employees open up about barriers they may be facing when you may be experiencing hearing early on, like, nothing that I can think of at the moment, or everything's looking good right now, but there may be some barriers. How have you helped employees open up about that?
Yeah, Mandy, it's a really important point. And part of that is first, it's about making yourself human. And two pieces. One, once they know, that they have a real relationship with you, and I'm not rounding with you out of compliance because somebody is telling me that I need to round. I'm really rounding with you, Mandy, because I care about making sure that you have what you need and I can support you. So it's really about me crawling into your head. And once you know that, the likelihood of you expressing what your real needs are is going to be higher. And then what Dee indicated earlier, a lot of it's going to depend on, are we following through? Because if I'm expressing something and it's a particular pain point and I don't hear anything back, you may be working on it, but if I'm not getting that loop of feedback back, that scaffold of communication, I'm going to make the assumption that I've shared it, but no one's working on it. Even if we're stuck and we can't solve for it, if I get that feedback loop back, I'm going to actually trust that we can communicate about anything, and we're going to be working on it together as one team. Dee Dee, what would you add to that?
I agree with all of that. And vulnerability and transparency, us demonstrating that to those that we're talking to, and then encouraging them to be very transparent and vulnerable with us. And that's where the trust and compassion and care come, so that they don't feel isolated. They feel like that they can raise the tough issues with us.
Sergio, anything you'd add?
I spoke about the visibility, and I think one of the keys on the leader rounding is going to where they work. And that starts to build a safe place and a trusting place that both of you have spoken about. And then sometimes we have to change the questions within our guide, right? And sometimes they have to be a little more specific to maybe their area of expertise. Yep. Right? We may not be an expert, and that may be a question you ask. I'm not an expert at your job, yet I want to know more of how can I help you, and what barriers or what resources would make your work easier, or even when you were doing your work, how did that go? Did it go as planned, or how did you execute it? And sometimes getting into their job makes it easier to get the responses back out of them.
Yeah, you raised a couple of really important points, Sergio, that, as leaders are working with rounding, sometimes we're rounding really for that, building that tight relationship. I want to make sure that you feel supported, you have what you need as a member of the team. And sometimes if we're working on a literacy project, or there's a big facility project, I might be rounding specifically of how is it going, and do you have the support you need with what the specific work is. So modifying those questions ends up being really important. So it isn't just relationship building. It isn't just about a work task, but you're actually building both. That culture and strategy also fits in that example too. The only other thing, and Sergio, you raised it, of being able to go to them, and the only thing I would highlight is, if I were in the car, and I'm, and we're in a meeting, and I know that I haven't reached out to a principal, I would actually use that time to connect, even if it's not face to face, because it's more important that we build that cadence of connection and we aren't missing people than it is to say, this week I'm traveling and I can't round. I can round with a lot of people if I'm taking the moment in a car, or as I'm, transitioning between meetings. And what you're indicating is it's not always that way. It's that blend of face to face, that blend of, going to the people closest to the work. Mandy, we've got a few minutes left, and I know that we're going to be doing a wrap up and tee up of what's coming up next. Is there one more quick question that you want to add before we go into a wrap up?
Yes, I think a really nice wrap-up question. I know we focused in this series around really supporting new leaders. This question's about how do you support and re-engage those tenured leaders that we're going to be asking to come along as role models, peers, and mentors to also help support new leaders? How do you keep them engaged and support them when they're going to be supporting new leaders?
Yeah, Mandy, it's really an important point. And part of this isn't magic wand stuff, right? So if I'm working in a team and they've been struggling, and there's been a lot of history of wounds within the culture, you're really going to have to build that sense of, you're not going to walk in the door and say, it's a new day, right? Because there's going to be a lot of pieces that we're going to need to walk through, demonstrate that level of trust, demonstrate that level of care, demonstrate that, we're regrounding into really a set of core values. What Dee Dee highlighted early around that commitment to service, it's really a matter of pausing to say, how will we show up for one another? How are we grounding our core values as a team? What are our key priorities? And it's that daily, weekly feedback, even if I've worked on the team for 20 years, to make sure that they, when they're leaning in, it's recognized. And when it's clear that they're not leaning in, they're getting those little nudges. And I'm not waiting for March 15th to put it in writing. I'm actually giving them those little nudges in the moment so that they can see it's important. This is us as one team, and we are going to be working on both the work together and collectively making sure that we're moving toward those bright spots. So it's really been fun, Mandy. I appreciate the time and everything that you've done on the back end to make sure that the webinar series is available, and everyone who is supported with the communication out so that our members attending could come. I really also want to just thank, on behalf of Sergio, Dee Dee, and I, you're taking the time out of a very busy week as you're preparing for your next school year to really invest in your learning and the learning for your team. So our gratitude is to you for the hard work that you're doing on behalf of the children, the team members, and the communities that you're serving. We also want to invite you to join us. We're going to be together in Denver, in the Denver area, Westminster, Colorado, in October. What I love about this opportunity is this is one time a year where executive leaders come together and share the strategies and execution on how are they really creating impact, the evidence that they're getting, the core strategies that are replicable. And it's really not about one organization shining. It's really about creating that spread so that we can actually manage up the work across systems. It's powerful and it's purposeful, and we can't wait to see you there. So, Mandy, do you want to add anything about the feedback loop?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. So first of all, like Pat said, thank you so much for your time and for investing in this time with us, for your leadership. We offer all kinds of resources and learning opportunities. If you want to be the first to know when the next What's Right in Education is coming up, or when we're releasing new leadership toolkits, don't hesitate to subscribe. We typically send out something weekly just with the newest resources that we have to offer, all great value. So use the QR code there or go to suitereducation.com/subscribe, and we'll make sure to get those resources in your hands.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sergio. Thanks, Dee Dee, Mandy, and everyone who attended. Have a great rest of your day.